guilty. The jury was a little confused by all that, but they went to deliberate. Surprisingly, they were not out very long at all. And they came back and they found the defendant guilty. And the defense attorney was stunned. He said, "How could you do that? How could you possibly find him guilty? You had reasonable doubt. I saw you stare at the door." And the foreman of the jury looked at him and he said, "We all looked at the door. Your client did not." Yeah, you were waiting for a punchline. That's not a punchline. It's that's right. Let's look at a passage from James. We're going to kind of switch the Old and New Testament up here. A passage from James that helps set the stage. "Let your patience show itself perfectly in what you do. Then you will be perfect and complete and will have everything you need. But if any of you needs wisdom, you should ask God for it. He is generous to everyone and will give you wisdom without criticizing you. But when you ask God, you must believe and not doubt. Anyone who doubts is like a wave in the sea, blown up and down by the wind. Such doubters are thinking two different things at the same time, and they can't decide about anything they do. They should not think they will receive anything from the Lord." So today we begin a new sermon series. Pretty short, 4 weeks leading up to and including Mother's Day. Can you believe that? 4 Sundays, Mother's Day. We just finished Easter. It seemed like right before that we had just finished Christmas, and yet we are now looking ahead to Mother's Day. And these are going to look at post-resurrection appearances. Times Jesus showed up after Easter. That's what we're focusing on. The time between Easter and the Ascension. 40 days. He appeared several times. We're not going to talk about all those, though. I cherry-picked 4 of them so that we can look at what happened, kind of an overview of what happened between Easter and the Ascension. And the series has kind of an odd name, Closing Night Strike. My theater friends from college even those who don't have any connection to church at all, will recognize the title. They'll wonder what the world it means in this context, but they'll recognize it. It's a theater term. Closing night strike is when you tear the set down and put it away, when you store away all the costumes, you store away all the props, shut everything down after a play or a musical is over. Okay, that's what closing night strike is. So what's the connection between closing night strike and the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus? You might be thinking right now, yeah, that's a bit of a jump, isn't it? Well, here's the connection. Closing night strike, you're in a play, and you work for weeks, frankly, months on this play. You practice almost every night. You rehearse in the theater, but you also rehearse at home because you're memorizing lines. You're doing character development. You're constantly working on this thing, and you're constantly there. And it's what you do, and you do it day after day and week after week. Like I said, for months, this has been a focus, and you build up to the performances. And at least in where I went to college, usually 6 performances spread out over 2 weekends, 2 consecutive weekends, and the whole thing would shut down after the last Saturday night performance. Well, then comes closing night strike. And for us, closing night strike, if you were a freshman theater major, if you worked on the show, or if you acted in the show, you were required to be at closing night strike. Those freshmen worked on it, acted in it. So a lot of people had to be involved in closing night strike. Us, as actors, we conveniently took a long time to shower and get all the makeup off and stuff to get upstairs and work on it, but that's the way it works. And so usually 2 hours or so, tear the whole thing down because everybody wants to leave. You tear it all down, you pack it all away, and you're left with an empty stage. That's what it looks like, ideally, at the end of closing night strike. But what's interesting is you worked on this thing for months, and you built up to it, and you built up to it, and all of a sudden there are the performances, and then you tear it down. And it's the next day, and you go, wow, what now? I've been working so hard on this thing, and all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, it's done. What do I do now? That's the connection. Because churches work so hard to get to Easter. We spend so much effort, so much energy toward Easter. The excitement builds, the expectations are high. Easter comes, everybody looks great, the worship is powerful, it's meaningful. And then Monday comes. Then the day after Easter comes. The show is over. The sets have been struck, almost. The sets have been struck, the costumes have been stored away, and the church is left to ask, what now? What now? Now, don't get me wrong, Easter this year was spectacular, I thought. Between Holy Thursday, Maundy Thursday, and Easter Sunday, between those days, 566 people worshiped with us. That's amazing. That's spectacular. And it is absolutely the biggest single week that this church has had in a long time. But when the last verse of "Up from the grave he arose" ends, it's not the end. It's the beginning. And so we look at that first Easter morning. And it started 40 days of post-resurrection appearances by Jesus. For 40 days he showed up in different places. Hundreds of people saw him. It wasn't just 2 or 3 or just the disciples. Hundreds of people saw him in several different contexts. So we're going to look at 4 stories that capture the beauty and the power and the majesty of this stretch between end of Easter and Ascension, post-resurrection appearances. And each week we're also going to include a song that's not only tied to the theme of the week, but it's actually, the title of the song is the title of the message because it relates to the story. So today we're going to talk about what it means to be skeptical. We are skeptical by nature, aren't we? I read that did you know that Gary Cooper was originally offered the role of Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind? And he turned it down, and his words, and I quote, were, "I'm just glad it'll be Clark Gable falling on his face and not Gary Cooper." In 1962, Decca Records turned down a new band called the Beatles. And they said, "We don't like their sound, and guitar music is on the way out." A professor of electrical engineering at New York University said, "The supercomputer is technologically impossible." In 1977, Ken Olsen, who was the CEO of a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, he said, "There is no reason that anybody would want a computer in their home." In 1977, he said that. Maybe the most all-encompassing statement of skepticism that's ever been uttered came from a guy named Charles H. Duell. And he was the commissioner of the U.S. Patent Office. And in 1899, Charles Duell said this: "Everything that can be invented has been invented." 1899 and everything, wow! Humans are skeptical. We're just a skeptical lot. And it's just as true of the first century disciples as it is of us. So we're going to look at the story that Melissa lifted up. We're going to look at John 20, 24 through 29. And we danced around it on purpose last week as a lead-in. Hear these words. Thomas, called Didymus, who was one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. The other followers kept telling Thomas, "We saw the Lord." But Thomas said, "I will not believe until I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand in his side." A week later, the followers were in the house again. Thomas was with them, and the doors were locked. But Jesus came in and stood right in the middle of them. And he said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand here in my side. Stop being an unbeliever and believe." And Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." And then Jesus told him, "You believe because you see me. Those who believe without seeing me will be truly blessed." So it's important to understand something about Thomas, because he gets a bad rap, I think. He isn't singled out here in this story because he's a huge example of doubt. It's not because he has a weak commitment or a watered-down faith. Because earlier in the Gospel of John, if you remember the story, they're going to go to see Lazarus' tomb. They come and said, our brother is dying, come help us. And Jesus goes, yeah, we'll get there. And Jesus intentionally waits, and then they get news he's dead. And Jesus says, we're going to go. And the other disciples don't want to go because the last time they were there, the people tried to stone Jesus. So the other disciples are being prudent, they're being cautious, but Thomas is the one that says, okay, let's go, so that we might die with him. He's all in. And his steadfastness was rewarded when he got there, because he had a ringside seat for the staggering miracle of Lazarus coming back to life, walking out of the tomb as a foreshadowing of what was going to happen on Easter Sunday. Thomas's commitment to Jesus was enthusiastic, and it was wholehearted. I want to say that up front. Thomas had this kind of seeing is believing faith, a Missouri show-me kind of faith, and it had served him well up till now. Well, it served him well. Why should he change, you would ask? But what Thomas missed was that with the resurrection, Jesus' ministry took a quantum leap forward. On that Easter Sunday, everything changed, and Thomas hadn't quite caught up with it yet. The resurrection hadn't moved Thomas forward like it had some of the others. Hadn't moved him forward. So I wonder, what is it that keeps us from moving forward? What is it that holds us back from taking the next step? I think for most of us, it's fear. It's fear that holds us back. Because when the ground rules start to change, our greatest strengths can often become our biggest liabilities. And right now you're thinking, what? That doesn't make any sense. How can my greatest strengths be my liability? I want you to think of a company called Borden. Now you know who Borden is, right? Few companies were more familiar with it. They were more respected. They were more successful than Borden's. What's the cow's name? Elsie. We all know that, right? Elsie the cow. But what put Elsie in almost every refrigerator across America is also what eventually led to the company's downfall. Borden's strengths became their weakness. Because first, companies like Frito-Lay and Doritos, they started taking a larger and larger share of the snack chip market. And yet Borden didn't see any reason why they needed to change or add to their existing line of Wise potato chips. And you're going, Wise potato chips? Exactly. They didn't see any reason they needed to change that. Then premium ice cream companies like Ben & Jerry's and Häagen-Dazs, they appeared and they started eroding that market from Borden's, but they didn't see any reason why they needed to change or add to their traditional, lower-priced Lady Borden ice cream. I guarantee not one of us has Lady Borden ice cream in our freezer right now. Then easy-to-prepare meals like Rice-A-Roni came out and became more and more popular, and again, Borden didn't see any reason why they should change their Prince spaghetti or Classico spaghetti sauce line. And so over time, that unwillingness to change eventually brought poor old Elsie to her knees. After huge financial losses in the 1990s, an equity company by the name of KKR, they leveraged a hostile takeover of the Borden Company, 1995. And by 2001, they had shut down all of Borden's operations. By 2005, they had divested all of Borden's operations and companies. So Borden Dairy brand now only exists through licensing agreements with other companies. So in the end, poor Elsie was led to the slaughterhouse at a price per pound that was much lower than anybody ever imagined, all because they were unwilling to change, to see a new way. That leads us to Psalm 31. Hear these words. Praise the Lord. His love to me was wonderful when my city was attacked. In my distress, I said, God cannot see me. But you heard my prayer when I cried out to you for help. Love the Lord, all of you who belong to him. The Lord protects those who truly believe, but he punishes the proud as much as they have sinned. All you who put your hope in the Lord, be strong and be brave. So what I learned from Thomas is that a healthy amount of doubt is not a bad thing. We talked about this last week. If you never sincerely doubt, then you never completely believe. But Thomas shows us how to escape the trap of depending on ourselves, depending on our own strengths. Because that's what he did. He hid behind his strong commitment to the visible signs and wonders of Jesus. That's what he focused on, was what he could see with his eyes. And he wasn't disappointed, so he built it all around that. But ultimately, he had to change. And he had to be humble. And he had to accept Jesus' offer of forgiveness and love when Jesus showed up before him alive and well, nail holes and all. When confronted by a living, breathing Jesus Christ, doubting Thomas didn't even have to touch the nail holes. I love that part of the story. He said, I am not going to believe until I do that. And Jesus showed up and he said, okay, go right ahead. And once it was right there in front of him, he didn't even have to. Instead, all he did was stand in wonder and amazement and say, my Lord and my God. And as I pointed out in last week's sermon, Thomas's response in faith to Jesus' love and forgiveness, by allowing himself to be weak enough to accept the fact that he simply wasn't strong enough on his own. Thomas made this shift from only focusing on what he could see to accepting fully what was in front of him, what was changing his life. So the song, The Long and Winding Road, written by the most successful songwriter in history, Paul McCartney. The most successful songwriter in history. A little trivia note, my wife taught me the other day. Anybody, I'll let you say if they don't know, but anybody, I'm sorry, you forgot, you told me. Anybody know who the second most successful songwriter in history is?
Randy Newman.
Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees. But Paul McCartney is the most successful songwriter in history. And so this song, The Long and Winding Road, it originally appeared on their Let It Be album. It was their 20th and would prove to be their last U.S. #1 hit. And it hit on May 23rd, 1970. It also would prove to be their last single ever released. Pretty powerful song. And the song has a lot to say about life, about faith, and about doubt. Here are some of the words from the song. The long and winding road that leads to your door will never disappear. I've seen that road before. It always leads me here. Lead me to your door. Many times I've been alone. Many times I've cried. Anyway, you'll never know the many ways I've tried, and still they lead me back to the long and winding road. I mean, the bottom line is that life leads us all over the place, doesn't it? Life winds us in and out and up and down. And sometimes life finds us feeling alone, feeling brokenhearted. But Thomas reminds me that it's Jesus who continues to call us forward. Not just out, but forward. Continues to call us there, looking for deeper understanding and a stronger faith. And according to the song, that unending road of life always leads us back to Jesus if we're willing to stick with it. I read a quote this week by a writer named Herb Kahn, and he said this pretty blunt. He said, the trouble with born-again Christians is that they're often an even bigger pain in the neck the second time around. So what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest strength? Thomas teaches me that that's quite possibly also where you are the most vulnerable. Has your greatest strength become your greatest weakness? Jesus' gift to Thomas that day wasn't just the hands to touch, but it was to empower him to stop doubting and believe. And he makes the same offer to us as well. This Sunday after Easter, he empowers us in the same way. Instead of show me signs, God offers us the unmerited gift of faith. And it's a gift we can't earn. It's a gift we don't deserve. And that gift boils down to nothing less than the love and the forgiveness and the grace of Jesus Christ. I believe. Would you pray with me? Father God, I thank you for this Sunday.